Oh God, here as in a vegan, here as in a vegan in Vietnam, here as a vegan around the world. Yeah, there's a lot of facets to that. So I was an anti-vegan asshole for 33 years. I would say I'm a vegan asshole now, but previously I was an anti-vegan asshole. And so like people don't really change as they go vegan, apparently. But yeah, I rode horses for a living. I've been an animal lover my whole life. I use those air quotes when I talk about that, for non-vegans in my industry. But so I was really into horses. I've always, animals have been my best friend my whole life, and I just had no idea because I was surrounded by people who love animals. They love them. I love my horses. I love my purebred Jack Russells. I love fox hunting. I love foxes. That's great. I especially love it when we murder them and we put their blood on our faces. Because that's love. So I was a fox hunter. I worked for National Turkey Federation in Washington, D.C., straight out of university. I have a degree in international politics. So I was riding horses in Virginia, where I'm originally from, and went to university in DC, and just went straight into this trade industry organization called National Turkey Federation, which basically my full-time job was to get people to eat more turkey.
Wow.
And now I run the only farm sanctuary in the history of Vietnam. So somehow between that and this, when I turned 33, I was in Vietnam. I'd been living around the world for a bit. I left the US in, I don't know, 2006-ish or something. Ran like hell. I was in Kosovo and then Poland and Mongolia and whatever, where I met my first vegans in Mongolia.
Right. Okay.
So that's where you meet vegans.
Yeah.
So I met my first vegans there, and they were couch surfers. And they were people who were traveling across the world, and they were continuing to eat as vegans. And so I, of course, made fun of them because I'm an asshole, and thought they were just a joke. But I would eat this lovely food that they were cooking at my house. That was fun. The meat in Mongolia, I figured out, was actually, it tasted like a sweaty shoe. It was like eating my own sock. And it was at a point where I started to kind of go on this path of figuring out what it was exactly that, how animals were living and things. And when you move to Mongolia, where there's 2.6 million people and 42 million animals, particularly livestock, 12 million of them horses, which is really why I went there. That's when you kind of start thinking like, well, this is how they're supposed to live, right? This is the free range paradise, like they're living the life in negative 50 degrees, and starving to death all winter. Yeah, it's great. And so they were living this great life. Why did they taste like a sweaty shoe? And I started to make this sort of connection and talk to people, and there was sort of just a slow introduction through couch surfing of people who were vegan, where I never, ever would have met those people as a rider. In the horse world, we would go to the races, we would go to the shows, we would go fox hunting, and then we would come and we would have a pig roast after the races. But we all love animals so much. We're just these big animal lovers. We've got our barn cats and our ponies, and we give them all the kisses, and we take all the selfies, and we were so full of shit. So being in Mongolia and meeting people that were people I would never otherwise meet, that is really kind of where my vegan journey started. I went to my first Loving Hut restaurant around the corner from my house in Mongolia, which is crazy. There's a vegan restaurant just around the corner. It was the closest restaurant to me, actually. So that was kind of my first introduction to it, and I kind of slowly started reading more, and then I was in South America. I left Mongolia and escaped the winter to go to what I thought was going to be like some sort of like Latin paradise. I went to Chile. I was chasing volcanoes, doing my master's in disaster management. And it was cold as hell at the time, but I was involved with a lot of fish farming. There was a lot of salmon farming in Chile. So I kind of had a much closer interaction than I ever had with people who were confining fish into small spaces, and that was in northern Patagonia in the area of Chiloé. And it was gross. It was just my first sort of understanding of like, ugh, this is factory farming in the seas. So I saw more of that, you know. So through my travels, I get to see sort of a very different way that people are using animals around the world, and in different cultures and different landscapes and different languages, and you know, different agricultural systems, whether they be factory farming or backyard, nomadic as well. So I've had this really wide view of it, and I eventually ended up in Vietnam, kind of by accident, what I thought was short term, and yeah, I sort of realized that the food was the best on the planet, and I couldn't stop eating vegan food here. I suddenly started losing like a ton of weight. I thought I had cancer. I was convinced I was dying because I lost all this weight, and I didn't know why. And I realized it was because I was eating well. And then I started to connect it to all the other things I was seeing, and realized that, you know, and more couch surfers and more couch surfers and more couch surfers that were vegan. And yeah, I'd say a lot of my vegan journey had something to do with random people living in my house in strange countries. So, and being introduced to the best food on the planet, in my humble opinion, here for 10 years. So, so yeah, basically what happened was I did a kind of, not veganuary. My veganuary was in February, and I had, I just realized what an absolute fool I was for saying for my whole life that I loved animals, and having them on my plate. Obviously, I loved some animals, but my version of love was garbage. It was absolute shit for most animals. And I would never do to a horse what I did to a cow on a daily basis, or a chicken or a pig. And so I went vegan in 2013, February 2013, which I have on my my little fork here. This is from Times of Change in Florida. They make beautiful jewelry for vegans. So a little shout out there. But they, basically I went vegan then, and the next month I started an animal rescue. Which I don't recommend. I don't really feel that that's necessarily the really obvious step in becoming an animal activist, is be like, yay, I'm vegan in Vietnam, so let's just open an animal rescue that has never existed in this part of the country before. Nor were there any resources for it. I mean, we didn't have dog collars in the city. We had to, drive 45 minutes to buy pet food. We had to, we had to fly in most of our supplies. We had to, we didn't have cat vaccines for 2 years.
Wow.
I started an animal shelter in a low resource environment because I went vegan and obviously drink too much coffee. And it seemed like a good idea at the time. And now 9 years into the organization, I feel like it's just, you're so deep in. Like, how do you, I don't know. There's no way back. There's no way back after seeing what I've seen and doing what I do, and starting the first first and still only farmed animal sanctuary in the country of Vietnam. And we started the first nonprofit veterinary clinic as well in 2015, which unfortunately had to close because people hate vegans and didn't want to give us the funding to keep it running. So, it's been a journey. It's been a real big journey, but I am, I've been vegan now probably in 70-ish countries around the world. There's no way back. That's my journey.
It's incredible. There's so much I want to talk about there, but I'm really fascinated.
There's a little bit to unpack. Yeah,
there's a little bit to get into there. The bit that I'm just to kick us off though is what was there a specific thing that you'd witnessed or seen in Vietnam that had compelled you to take that particular route of action? Because, like you say, I think if I think back to when I went vegan, the last thing I probably felt capable of taking on a month later was like,
No,
and now I'm going to open up a shelter. Like
Brilliant.
even if
Yeah.
I'd felt that would have been a great thing to do, it might have been maybe I'll volunteer at a shelter, maybe I'll
Yeah.
do this, maybe I'll do that. It wouldn't necessarily be let's just start one. So was there
Let's
something
jump
that
into it.
really compelled you to do that?
Well, so at the time, I mean, I was, the dog meat trade is something that I think most people will know about Vietnam. People generally know two things about Vietnam. There was a war, and there's the dog meat trade, which is less than 1% of the animals killed in the country, but everybody gets their knickers in a twist over it because they are predominantly non-vegans that are talking about it. But so that was kind of like the impetus that got it started. And basically, because I'd had all this animal management experience working in facility management for horses and like Olympic level facilities in Virginia, in Middleburg and West Palm Beach, Winter Equestrian Festival, and kind of in places that were like really profoundly good veterinary systems and trainers and all of this, and I really felt that I could do this because I'm a dumbass and really fucking naive. Pardon my French. I just really naive to think that I could, be capable of doing what I did. And like I, was telling you before, the coffee's basically meth, and it's really strong here. So basically, I think what I had seen in Vietnam is, you see the dog catchers and the cat catchers generally on a daily basis here. And for some reason, like, even though I was vegan, even though at that point I already knew that what I was doing was for all animals, the dog and the cat meat trade, I think, was like something that as a Westerner, as an American, kind of like got me in a way that other things didn't. I was still, unfortunately, the pervasive ideology in animal advocacy is welfarism, which is rubbish. And just makes me like, I mean, you can see my body like I'm ready to like fight when I say the word welfare. It really makes me want to punch a hole in the wall at this point. But at the beginning, I didn't have any other guidance into abolitionism or veganism. I didn't know vegans. There was vegan food all around me. I had great food. I had this great experience, culinary experience. But I didn't have anybody else other than these doggy-loving, pig-eating people who were like, we have to end the dog meat trade, but we can't tell people not to eat meat. And it didn't take me terribly long to figure out what a load of crap that was. But in the beginning, that was sort of, I think, the impetus. Also, I went scuba diving, and I remember, there are these moments that kind of cut your life in half.
Yeah.
Right? And I think, to me, the day that I went scuba diving was the day that cut my life in pre-scuba, post-scuba. It was like under the sea, above the sea, then under the sea. And I think what I saw was, holy shit, what have I done? What have I been a part of? This isn't mine to take. What have we done? That had a lot to do with why I started the organization, the sea. I was also doing my master's degree at the time in I have a master's in emergency and disaster management. I focus on animals and disaster, particularly climate change related disasters. So you start talking about climate change, you have to start talking about animal agriculture, right? So all of these things started to come together at this one little spring that this all happened, where like all the wheels started turning in this really intense way. And then also people started to tell me that I was going to die if I was a vegan. So I was like, all right, suck it. I'm going to do a marathon. So I started doing long distance endurance racing when I went vegan, on top of starting the animal rescue, because I wanted to show everybody that if I was going to die, it was going to be at the end of a 42-kilometer race. And then I went from marathoning to Ironman and whatever. So like, which I eventually learned was just really me drugging myself out of the trauma of the work that I got myself into. So. You know what? But I don't make enough money to buy heroin, so unfortunately I have to run. I think if I had the time or the money, I would definitely be a heroin addict. But instead, I'm a endurance athlete. So, right? But vegan athletics, I think, became a really big part of my life at that time as well. Kind of as a kind of like I do everything, kind of like an in your face, like, watch me. You know, watch me die. Watch me die while you sit on your ass drinking a beer at the end of the Ironman finish line. You know, and so like all of these things sort of came together at once in this perfect storm. But yeah, I don't know. I could have gone about it a little better. You know, with probably like a little tiny bit less intensity. And maybe like little baby steps instead of throwing myself headfirst into the fire with all aspects of it. But that's kind of the way it goes. Yeah.
Talking of intensity, I'm looking at the shelter's website and so on. You are really upfront about what you stand for, and I love that. There's veganism is front and center. It's like you said earlier, you can't talk about climate.
It's not a swear word.
Exactly. You can't talk about climate change without talking about animal agriculture. And yet, so many organizations...
Everybody does. Glasgow.
Exactly. Yeah. So many organizations do, and some very, very big ones do, talk about it all the time without...
Because it's...
Exactly, because of the cash and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Going into this as a new venture, again... That would be, for most people, a source of trepidation. For you, was that ever a concern that you weren't going to put veganism on the front page, if you like?
So I made this sort of mistake. I think we all have to at some point. You know, I mean, you kind of get into business with people who are kind of available and with you. And I did at the time with somebody who was not vegan and was very adamant that I do not speak about veganism. And over time, it became quite clear that she was going to remain that way. And and so we split the organization between the two of us. At that point, I think I am just kind of one of those people that's just really obnoxious in the way that, like, if you tell me I can't say something or do something, I'm going to do it louder and prouder. And I think the pushback that I got from the anti-dog meat people was enough for me to be far more obnoxious about it. And I think it's just kind of who I am. I think, you know, what is it? The Briggs-Meyer personality test or something. It's one of these personality tests. I'm called the debater, right? So like I should have been a lawyer for sure. No doubt I should have been, a litigator because that would have, God, it would have at least paid me to buy a new damn pair of shoes, which I really need right now. But that's not the point. I mean, my personality puts me in the situation of like, go ahead, fuck with me. I'm going to push this topic. If it makes you uncomfortable, I apologize if your frail ego is a little bit upset, but frankly, I came from where you are. Number one, I was a fox hunter. I was a anti-vegan. I used to say that I wanted all vegans to be put on an island so that we could napalm it. Yeah. So if you want to talk about people who are anti-vegan and pushy about it or whatever, people who have frail egos, it's me. It was me, and I changed. You know, I do very strongly believe that people are capable of change. Am I for everybody? Am I everybody's cup of tea in the way that I am in my personality? No, I'm mostly not even my own cup of tea. You know, I really, it's just who I am. I'm just naturally somebody who is a bit more confrontational and a bit more willing to just push that button a little bit. I am, I do drink too much coffee. I am bipolar. That might help a little bit. I don't have really a great deal of ability to understand risk, nor do I care about it at all. If I did, I mean, I just feel like, and that's been quite beneficial in this work. It sounds like a disability, and a lot of times it is, but it also has been probably one of the best things possible for advocacy. And though I think a lot of people will tell me that, like you said, on that website, and everything we talk about is really very much like, this is what welfare does, this is what animal rights is, and this is why we would never, ever, ever advocate for trying to find the right way to do the wrong thing. And that really gets in people's faces, but like, they're allowed to turn that off. I can't make everybody happy.
Yeah.
If you're trying to make everybody happy, you're going to be really, really, really disappointed. Yeah, and it is a financially detrimental decision to be who I am. I'll admit that. As a nonprofit in Vietnam, I have a very tiny market to start with. So being the way that I am on that website and all of our media and the way that I talk, yeah, I've really screwed us financially, and I know that very well. But, you know, like I was saying, it's like to somebody else today, I think it's like when the most dangerous people in the world are those that have nothing left to lose. You know, when you're at the bottom, when you have sort of so much against you and you don't have anything, like there's nothing to risk. What are you going to take from me? You've already taken my clinic, right? I had a clinic for 3 years that was closed because the anti-dog meat people got really offended that I started talking about veganism. The anti-dog meat people were previously, they were previously funding a lot of the veterinary work. And when I was pushing veganism too much, they started and talking anti-xenophobia, which is very much a part of the anti-dog meat trade propaganda. All of that, anti-speciesism and whatever, people started to drop like flies. So we lost most of our funding, and I lost the very first nonprofit clinic that ever existed in the history of Vietnam because I have a damn big mouth and I won't shut up about veganism. So it's not like I don't know what there is to lose. I know very much what it's like to lose everything, and I'd do it all over again if it means having the integrity to stand up for all the animals, because it's exhausting to see people, I don't know, I get a little bit pissed off at silent vegans. Yeah, 2.8 trillion animals don't need your silence. They need you to stand up. They need you to stand up, and you know what? People are going to be mad.
Yeah.
Let them be. I actually went vegan because I was angry that somebody told me I didn't love animals. You know, I pushed it. When somebody said, you don't love animals, look at what's on your plate. I was like, my whole life has been about animals. All I've ever done is work with animals. How can you tell me? How dare you tell me that I don't love animals? So I started looking up what they were talking about. And I was like, oh, okay. Foot in mouth. Okay. Yeah, I feel like to be outspoken is not optional. My son is a pig. My best friend / master of ceremonies every day, I mean, is a chicken. Louise, the oldest chicken in Vietnam, is, I don't know, I'm enslaved to her. She's really mean and really demanding, and I would do anything for that chicken. And if somebody looks at her wrong, I would be violent, you know. So I think at some point one just has to stand up for what matters, even if it upsets a lot of people, because the system won't change with your silence.
So I get the idea that there is a almost like a desire from other organisations perhaps to talk to get, let's just all talk about dog meat, because that's easy to talk about, and like particularly so if we're trying
lucrative.
If we're trying to get Western audience involved in funding. You know, that ticks
Racism
all the boxes.
sells. Yes.
Yeah, that ticks all the boxes, right? So, and like you say, that's hugely, you know, potentially detrimental to you to then to say, I'm not going to be part of that. I
was ostracized. I was completely ostracized from the rescue community for speaking out against not only the single issue campaigns and the welfarist ideology that is detrimental to trillions of animals, but yeah, I mean, I've lost everything as a result of it, and the only thing I have left is my integrity and some shoes with holes in them. And but yeah, ultimately what happened is the organizations that have pushed that have fed into the xenophobia, the racism that is so deeply ingrained in animal advocacy in single issue campaigns. And whether that be dog meat is a good example, but foie gras. Okay, so the French are big foie gras people, but they also eat horses sometimes, right? Everybody gets their knickers in a twist about that, in spite of the fact that they're more than happy to go to the races and watch those horses, have legs broken on the track, right? But then they're like, the French, you know, I can't believe the French would eat a horse. I'm like, I can't believe that you're perfectly happy paying for a horse to do what they do. And I'm saying this from somebody who used to ride horses like that, you know?
Yeah.
I used to jump those jumps and go to those races. So, I think it's like the whole single issue campaign has a tendency to target a population, and completely avoids putting that mirror up and saying like, yeah, okay, so like what is it? It is less than 1%. So 5 million dogs are killed in Vietnam, 44 million pigs are killed, over 600 million chickens are killed, 80,000 tons of fish are ripped out of the ocean. So like we're looking at a very small percentage of animals, and what it does when we use that single issue campaign is that it targets the Vietnamese specifically, and a place most people couldn't find on a map anyway, but and then Asians in general, without being like, hey, you guys been to Waitrose? Yeah, you walk down the aisle, Waitrose, have you checked that out? Because it's a morgue. Yeah, Sainsbury's is a morgue. Yeah, Asda, it's a morgue. You guys are so great. Why? Because you put a Chihuahua, you put your Chihuahua in a tutu? I don't know. Because you have laws against animal cruelty? Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but you guys still, in the UK, you consume far more animal products than Vietnam total. We've got 95 million people. You've got, what, 60 million? Yeah? So America, United States, consumes 3 times as many murdered animals as Vietnam. Yeah, per capita. I'm not talking about total. Yeah. So the idea that they're savages is being brought up by these xenophobic single-issue campaigns against dog meat. Yeah, and for every single dog catcher that I've seen today, I've seen another 15 chicken and pig trucks. Yeah. Yeah, but we don't want to talk about that. Let's not talk about that, because then your bacon eaters won't donate. You can talk about dog meat all you want, but if you got bacon grease dripping off your chin, you need to step back. Yeah, you need to step back and put that mirror up. So it's just, but they're making money off of this racism that they're fueling, the xenophobia and the attacks on Asians, which have, of course, increased over COVID. And I just don't have any tolerance for it. And when you speak out against that, especially as some dumb blonde, this isn't my real hair color, of course, but, some dumb blonde American bitch is saying, don't be racist towards Vietnamese. They're like, whatever, but because they expect me to be part of that racism, which I found really disgusting. And having to have those messages in my inbox for the past 9 years, talking about how savage they are here. And I'm like, hi, my staff are reading this. They're Vietnamese. Yeah, you want to tell them that? You want to talk about how savage they are? We're all vegans. Yeah? These are my neighbors. These are my countrymen. Yeah? Why don't you go have your bacon buddy and shove it up your ass? So,
does it?
Pardon.
Not at all. It's fine. Does your approach, has that made your work more supported, if you like, by those locally who agree with at least the stance you're taking? As in, when I think about if, and this may seem like a strange sort of logic, but I'll try and explain as best I can. But if I were local in Vietnam and could see what was going on in terms of these other welfare organisations saying, look at the savages of Vietnam who are eating dogs and this, that, and the other. If I saw, even if I disagreed with them, if I saw somebody who was running a shelter who said, well, that's not the case. Actually, what I'm trying to do is abolish all kind of use of animals across the board, I would be more inclined to support them than I obviously would anybody else, and maybe more inclined to listen to them as well on other issues, even if I disagreed. Have you found that, like locally, more at least willingness to listen?
Actually, no, surprisingly. I mean, I think unfortunately, it's interesting because, veganism is pervasive throughout Vietnam as a result of Buddhism. So the vegans in Vietnam are it's not really an animal rights issue as much as it is. I've got a screaming cat here. We think she has 3 ovaries and it's been crazy. So I apologize if you're listening to a screaming cat through my microphone. Anyway, what was I saying? I'm trying to not think about the exploratory laparoscopy that's about to go on with this cat.
Buddhism and veganism.
Got it. I remember. Yes. Okay. So veganism Buddhism in Vietnam is quite different from the rest of Southeast Asia. Is that we are vegan on the full moon and the half moon, so twice a month. And so veganism is sort of understood throughout the country, but it's not connected to animal rights or animal rescue, animal shelters in general. Like that connection just doesn't seem to really make a ton of sense.
Right.
It's a dietary choice, and it's not related to animal production that's around them. It's all really based upon compassion taught through Buddhism. So looking at us as an animal shelter, whether our posts are in English or Vietnamese, I think like they haven't really sort of seen that we're talking anti-xenophobic, abolitionist type work at a point where we're like these little. It's at the very beginning of the concept of animal rights in this country, particularly because human rights don't really exist terribly much here. It's a very, I don't know. That's a really, really difficult question. I think people are still super attracted to the anti-dog meat campaigns, even as local Vietnamese, because they're not reading what Westerners are saying about them.
I see.
I really don't think, I think everybody has this idea that like, I mean, Vietnam is 95 million people, right? I mean, there's a lot of people and most don't speak English, right? So they're not getting that information from Humane Society International and Soy Dog and all of the, Four Paws and whatever that are talking about the anti-dog meat campaigns, the big ones that have the largest marketing. That's not targeted towards the Vietnamese. That's not targeted at all towards the Vietnamese because they're not donors. Right? So I don't think they're reading what we are saying about them. I don't think they give a shit. I don't think that's even really all that important.
Yeah.
They're a massive country and they are important in and of themselves and not really sort of in relation to the international sort of opinion of them. I think it's kind of difficult to explain unless you've like lived outside of the country for a really long time. I don't know. I think the Vietnamese just don't really give a damn about what we think about them.
Yeah. Well, in a way, the sort of the question could be viewed as, because it is, I guess, from a Western-centric viewpoint of like, well, how do people feel about everything that we think and how we relate?
It is. Yes.
When, as you point out, the reality is, well, we're fine, thanks, going about our own business, living our own, living our own lives.
That's exactly what it is.
Without necessarily worrying about what you guys are thinking over there about, so on and so forth. So it just intrigues me from the point of view that, I guess, like you said before, you being brought up in the States. Yep. Coming there, having a sanctuary within the midst of Vietnamese culture, there would, I would cause some curiosity, even if it was very locally.
Yeah, it does. I mean, they don't really get what we do. I mean, it's funny because I have this. I'm quite. I love local food so much, and I don't eat at a lot of the Western restaurants. So I eat at this one place. I can't really afford them, to be fair. But they're these great little local places, these local vegan places. And this one woman, we have these really funny conversations because they just kind of they're really nosy. I think the Vietnamese are some of the nosiest people I've ever met. Like they just ask these weird little questions, and and so I've had to show her my Instagram of the organization recently. This woman that owns my little vegan place where I get breakfast. And she really just doesn't. I mean, she's a vegan. She runs this vegan place, but she just she knows that I've explained to her that my son is a pig, my best friend is a chicken, my soulmate is a cat. She gets that idea that I'm a bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but she doesn't really understand what the organization does. And I've tried to explain in my best Vietnamese, it's I am a manager of an organization that takes care of animals and works with veterinary medicine, which is I think that to them is that doesn't really exist in Vietnamese organizations. That's not really a thing that they do.
Right.
Are there Vietnamese animal shelters? Yes-ish. There are hoarding facilities, and there are people that rescue and that don't provide particularly good veterinary care. And unfortunately, local veterinarians have very, very low capacity of veterinary science understanding, and so they're pretty awful. So for her to see my Instagram was very confusing. For her, she didn't really get it. And so a lot of times I bring some of the locals over, and they kind of like, like my market lady that brings all of my my pigs' food and stuff. They deliver it. They come in and I've known her for 8 years. I mean, she's like my mother. They bring all this food for the big pigs and stuff, and they're really curious. They just think it's quite funny the way that we live. We've got all these animals in this house, and there's like, one of my staff is Russian, and then I've got a new American staff, and often I've got Polish and Australian. Like, there's all these like weird people living in this house with all these animals over the years, and I think she just doesn't really get what we do. So I think in general she doesn't really. It's very difficult for like your average local person to understand the purpose of our work. And I know over the years, even though I've done education programs and things like this, I know over the years what my limitations are as a Westerner, coming from where I do, looking like I do, talking like I do, being confrontational like I am in a very non-confrontational society, and then trying to kind of, like, I don't have an educational purpose in this country. The best that I can do, I mean, it's like saying, what would you do if the Vietnamese came over to Portland, Oregon, and tried to get them to stop eating bacon? I mean, Portland's probably a really bad, let's say Texas, let's say Houston, okay? So like Portland, Oregon's full of vegans, right? It's not really it's not a hard sell, right? But like, let's say the Vietnamese came over, didn't speak particularly great English, and were like, okay, Houston, Texas, no more bacon for you. And they would all be like, oh, this is the end of my shotgun. That's how that would go, right?
Yeah.
So the idea that I have this cultural influence is it's just really ethnocentric white saviorism bullshit. I just don't. What I do have ability to influence is getting people to see, because I'm just, the way that I talk, the way that I look, the way that I am, and being an American and having connections in Europe, and I have the ability to help Westerners understand a little bit more about what it is like here, and where we are going and how things really are, which is a much harder job than you would think it is, because people still think this is a dog-meat country that had a war and it has nice beaches. But ultimately, my job here is more in the veterinary sector. I have access to resources that they will never have access to as an American with a nonprofit organization registered in the United States, and access to English-speaking veterinarians, international veterinarians that are capable of training local veterinarians to increase their capacity to do mass sterilization projects and vaccination projects, and work in an anti-speciesist veterinary training environment. Something that does not exist within the veterinary industry in Vietnam. And certainly they would never have access to finding those people, because this is just not a thing that's happening yet. It is just a pioneering kind of concept. And it's very contrary to what all the biggest organizations in this country are doing, because it's anti-speciesist. So it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And like you say, very difficult concept to explain to a Western audience, potentially.
Very.
Does that lead to you having to lead with the dog meat kind of bit as almost a Trojan horse?
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, I think that's a very insightful point. Yeah. I mean, I would say, because a lot of people will say, when I talk to people, I say, well, I live in Vietnam, wherever I am in the world, whether I'm in Colombia or, Germany or Scotland, when you chit chat with people, because obviously I'm kind of an obnoxious extrovert, I talk to everybody, and people are always, they want to know. And so I say, well, I actually live in Vietnam normally. And they're like, oh, they eat dogs there. And I'm like, oh, well, you murdered cows here. Where do you want to go with that, right? I said,
exactly.
We're actually the only vegan organization. I'm like, so where's the conversation going here? So normally my conversation about Vietnam and what we do usually starts with food, because I am probably, I don't know when Vietnam is finally going to start paying me for promoting their cuisine, because anybody who has met me out in the world will see, anybody who has seen this podcast that knows me from a restaurant that they had to wait on me at or something is going to be like, that's that girl that won't stop talking about Vietnamese food. I recognize her. she won't shut up about it. That woman is crazy. She loves Vietnamese vegan food. So that's kind of my intro into it. And then I talk about vegan food and how pervasive it is in the country as a result of Buddhism, and that, you know, it's just kind of a different angle. And then I start talking about why it's super important to have, you know, a vegan animal rescue, people that rescue animals that also don't murder them, like
would kind of make sense. Yep.
Right? Doesn't it? And people just sort of have this blank stare, and which makes me, you know, want to hit them. But yeah, I just feel like the dog meat is my Trojan horse in a way. If I can avoid it, I will, because it makes me a bit aggressive. But I don't know. I'm aggressive about everything. That's how I talk about coffee too. I mean, if we talked about coffee or you know, like fabrics, or I don't know, rolling papers, I would have the same aggression. You know, it's just who I am. You know, so, but it is important for people to understand that there is a lot more to Vietnam than what they think there is, and that, you know, 40% of the population is Asian. So if you want to be an asshole racist and talk about the dog meat trade, you really need to step back and be like, oh gosh, that's really stupid of me to be so ignorant, and maybe I should leave my home country for a bit and see what it's like to live amongst people that do not look or sound like me, and maybe that will make me a tiny bit less of an asshole. That's my spiel.
What does the journey look like from an animal's perspective who comes to live at your shelter? Like, I'd love to know like what that looks like. What's this kind of the scale?
Oh, geez, it's hard. It's hard because we've gotten them from a lot of different places.
Right.
You know, I mean, they've just come, God, it's really just such a variety of places. But basically, it often has been, they come into the shelter, we sort of have to assess their medical situation, which I've obviously gotten a lot better at, having owned a vet clinic for 3 years and lived in it, which was basically a trauma clinic because there's no preventative medicine in the country. Sounds like America, so not to, you know, knock on my healthcare system. But yeah, it's just very, very much a assessment, isolation, and then I kind of sit them down and I'm like, I don't know if this is gonna be weird for you, but I'm your mommy now, and I'm gonna do whatever the hell I can to make your life magical from this moment on, and it's gonna be okay now. You know, and we just have like a little private conversation, and then we just kind of get on with it. I'm like, you're gonna hate me for a month of what's happening right now, but it's gonna get good, dude. It's gonna get really good, and you don't even know. So that's kind of the beginning of it, and then, you know, unfortunately, the sort of the situation here is that we can't take any more animals in. We are
right.
stopping rescue entirely as a result of the fact that we simply don't have the funds, the veterinary capacity, particularly locally. And, you know, we wanted to work more on having just the farm sanctuary entirely, and working on veterinary training projects for that, so that vets are actually learning to, I don't know, take care of farmed species instead of just murdering them and exploiting them and reproducing them. So yeah, I think that was kind of what we wanted to do, but because people just don't really understand that you can't have this massive piece of property and just take in animals that have nowhere to go, you know, but unfortunately there's just not a lot of money in sanctuary on its own. You know, adoptions are very difficult to get. You know, the Vietnamese as adopters are generally not really going to adopt. There's kittens and puppies all around. Why would they get it from an organization like ours? Particularly because we have a lot of rules. Animals got to be indoors completely if it's a cat, because they're going to be stolen or they're going to be hit by traffic, by a motorbike or a truck. They're not allowed to run around, and so they have to be an indoor animal because it's unsafe. Dogs have to be walked on leashes, and they have to be in a safe garden. They have to be inside if you're not home, and then at night, because they will be stolen and poisoned. So there's a lot of parameters that the Vietnamese simply will not abide by, because it's just not how it is here. And so then what do? You just export a bunch of animals? Well, yeah, but it's like, you know, it's $800 to get to the UK. Is that really reasonable? You guys are already taking in a bunch of animals, you know, from Cyprus and Greece and, you know, Romania and Bulgaria and whatever. I mean, it's not reasonable. Do we just, how is that sustainable long term? How does that solve the problem? You know, people don't think about rescue as not being a solution, but it just isn't. It just isn't. And it's unbelievably fucking traumatic to be this person on the other side. For every rescue that we have that is a success, can you imagine how many we didn't save? I mean, can you imagine with the low resources that we have, not only the finances, but the veterinarians and the human caretakers, and the difficulty in finding human caretakers that are capable of managing a trauma case, and keeping them long term. This isn't a volunteer project. This is not something for volunteers. This is something for professional caretakers and veterinary nurses and people with veterinary experience and facility management experience. Can you imagine just that trauma that we have had to go through, I have had to go through in 9 years, the shit that I have seen. I wouldn't wish my job on my worst enemy. I don't hate anybody enough to give anybody my job. I really don't. It's not really a good sales pitch for taking over as director. But yeah, I mean, it's horrendous. Rescue on its own is a burnout job. In the United States, the average person works in rescue for 5.5 years. I've done this for 9. I've only been in a mental hospital once for it, shockingly. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty horrible, and it's not the answer. But yeah, that is the beginning, and unfortunately, a lot of them don't get adopted. You know, so that's why we have to stop taking animals in. We don't have large properties. Property law in Vietnam is much different than it is in the United States and the UK, and most of Europe. We have very small pieces of property. You can't just hoard a bunch of animals. It's not Thailand, Laos, or Cambodia even in that regard. You simply cannot have that much space. And so we're just really limited. So the best thing to do would be to do preventative care, right? Sterilization, vaccination, eliminate the population that ends up in rescue. Guess how sexy that is for donors. Yeah. I mean, here's a plate of testicles that we took out today. This is the answer. And they're like, you lost me, unfollow, right? And to me, that's like, I'm sorry, but a plate of testicles is the best thing that I've got. You know, sorry, that didn't, please don't put that as a byline. Please don't put that as a headline.
This is the episode title.
Plate of testicles is the best I got. But it is, any animal rescuer out there is going to be like, high five, yes, plate of testicles. Because it's the best thing ever. I mean, like, eliminating that population is the answer. Rescue is not the answer. And I have 2 cats fighting behind me. You guys are being assholes. Could you stop? Thank you. And you can't take those testicles out if you don't have veterinarians that are capable of sedating an animal, doing aseptic procedures, and knowing that sterilization is the answer, because most veterinarians in Vietnam don't even recommend sterilization. Most of them didn't even touch an animal during veterinary school. 5 years of veterinary school, can go through school without ever touching an animal, get out, and still be able to legally practice veterinary medicine in a private practice. So there's a lot bigger picture than what people think. The animal shelter itself is not the center of it, and to understand it all is like there's just a really big picture people are missing, and they want me to put up this is why I hate Twitter. 160. What is it?
Yeah, to explain that.
Are you shitting me? I could do I got like a 10-volume book about this. You know. Yeah. So that's the best. So thank you for having me on the podcast, so I could at least explain a little bit of it in a tidbit.
100%.
I'm very grateful.
There is no social media capable of explaining that in the nuance required.
No, not for the social, not for the attention span that exists in humanity at this point.
No, podcasts are our best route.
They are.
At least it's longer form.
It is. People listen to it in the gym, in the toilet, in the shower.
Yeah, 100%. So let's sort of our time is running away, but It's been just incredible, an incredible education for me. I've learned so much, and I thank you so much for your time. Appreciate life is incredibly busy for you. But we'd absolutely be remiss of us not to kind of just brass tacks tell people what it is that we need to do to support you in the amazing work you're doing.
Yeah, so I would say, I used to say, please donate. And I do say, please donate. We definitely do need that. We've lost 2/3 of our funding since the Russian war started, believe it or not. This is shocking. I had no idea that was going to happen. I got to, thanks, Putin. So, aside from the horror that it's creating around the world, it's also dropped charity nonprofits for the work that I do drastically. So donations are a really big thing that we need. I, however, would prefer that people understand that investing in financial stability in the charity sector is far more important through social enterprise investment, social impact investments, and even private equity funding and things like this. I think people really should consider that we are trying to start up a for-profit that creates a consistent revenue source for us so that we stop having to be in crisis. Because if you donate to charities only when they're in crisis, which unfortunately is the only reason anybody ever donates to rescue, then you're screwing us. Yeah, and not in the good way that we'd like to be, but in the that we all need for sure. Working in an animal shelter, but the way that like we are completely incapable of being able to plan ahead because people only donate during crisis. So my request to people out there who are interested in the work that we do as a very outspoken vegan abolitionist animal rescue, animal sanctuary, and veterinary program, battling speciesism and xenophobia within the veterinary industry and animal advocacy in general, is to invest in our long-term financial sustainability through emailing me, talking to me about what they can do to invest in a project that will create a return on their investment. So we've got a lot of work in the process right now. I can't really throw a lot of stuff out just yet.
Yeah.
That's concrete. Because I just got back to Vietnam just a couple months ago after being out for 2 years. But yeah, definitely donate if you can. vnanimalaid.org/donate, and or PayPal, Venmo. We've got TransferWise. We got any way you want to give us money. Come to Vietnam. Borders are open. Put it in my hot little hand. Let's go out to dinner and come rub some pig bellies. However you want to do it, definitely donate. But if you want to be able to invest in our long-term sustainability, which all rescues need, please, please, please get in contact with me.
Amazing. Well, we'll make sure the links are in the show notes, and I'll definitely encourage everybody to do that. Donate or get in touch about that long-term investment, because that sounds like it's absolutely critical.
Yes, it is, not just for us, but for other organizations. I'd really like to see the business model shifting away from donation only to a more sustainable system, particularly for rescues.
Kat, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm just running around like 30